Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, munchkins and donuts, welcome back to another episode of Eat the Donut. I have a very special guest on board today. One of my OG clients started back in training in person back in good old Massachusetts. And then obviously as I ventured off, we still stayed friends, but he ventured off on his own until he recently came back about 7 months ago to do more specific nutrition coaching, more fat loss coaching, and making some phenomenal progress, not only with dropping about 30 pounds, but also continuing to be a savage in the gym and get super strong. Let's go. Jeremy Pullen, what's going on, man?
Hey, what's going on?
Not much. How's the day going so far?
So far, so good. Beautiful sunny day here in Mass. So just enjoying the beautiful weather.
Is the weather nice right now?
Oh yeah, clear skies, nice sunny, probably like 60 degrees outside. Yeah.
Oh my
we'll
goodness.
Take this. We'll
I
take
feel like
this
it's
for sure.
It's nicer there than it is here in San Diego. It's been super rainy all week, but
Bummer.
we get about 20 days of rain a year, and the rest is pretty sunny, so I can't really complain. Even
It's
though
just all stacked to this week.
Yeah, it really is. It's funny. I always I don't know if you've seen, but on my social media and Instagram stories, I'll post every once in a while that it's like 50 degrees, and I'll say, hey, pray for me. We're getting a cold front here in San Diego. It's freezing. And then everyone's just chirping me that. It's like, hey, it's negative 20 here. It's 12 degrees here, and just giving it to me all.
Yeah, my wife was in Raleigh a couple weeks ago, and they got hit by a snowstorm. And she was like, everyone got school off, and they're basically out for the whole week. And it was just a few inches of snow. And I mean, like the comparison there is like life in Boston or life in the greater Boston area. You know, it takes like a foot of snow to knock out anything. So, yeah, very dramatically different.
It is funny visiting different states that are a little bit more south, but can get like a speck of snow, and like the city shuts down. Like I remember going to somewhere in Virginia, and they had a day of snow, and they were out of school for 3 days. And I get it. Obviously, they don't have the resources because they don't really expect that, so they kind of have to shut down. But it's so funny because we get a foot and a half of snow in Massachusetts. It's just another day. Like, not a big deal. Suck it up. Go out there and do your thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a change of expectations. But yeah, it's fun to observe.
Yeah, for sure. So anyways, Jeremy, having you on board today, because obviously you've had a great, transformation in the last 7 months, but you've even had a great sort of story over the last, half decade to decade of as far as like getting back into training and everything. So we're just going to share your story and any insight and feedback you have that can help people. I think it'd be great because I do think you're on a good path right now, a very solid path. But the first question I want to ask you, very important question here, is so this podcast is called Eat the Donut. So we like to talk about donuts. And I have to ask, like, what is your favorite donut?
Wow. Okay. All right. It's funny you should ask that because I was actually talking to a mutual friend of ours, also sort of in the fitness space, about this last week. And so I'll give you a recommendation for a donut place first.
Okay.
The place you got to go is in Medford, Mass. It's called Donuts with a Difference. And it's like kind of a hole-in-the-wall shop sort of in the center of town area. And it's the best donut shop ever. So that's a freebie for all you podcast listeners. If you're ever in the greater Massachusetts area, Donuts with a Difference, middle of Medford, that's the place to be.
I'm going to have to try it. I don't think I've ever had that.
Oh, they're amazing.
Is it been
incredible.
Around for a while?
I actually don't know, but it's one of those places where they'll like have the donut like line set up where they're like making them in front of you.
Yep.
So everything's fresh and delectable.
Those are the best. Those are the best.
It's amazing. But in terms of my favorite, I'm a big fruity dessert kind of guy. So so I'm like all about the lemon filled.
Sure.
Specifically, like I'm always a little bit torn whether I go like powdered lemon filled or glazed lemon filled, but I think I'll give the edge to a glazed lemon filled donut.
Yeah.
Chef's kiss.
You can't go wrong with a glaze. Glazed anything is the best out there. I mean, my favorite's always the French cruller. I don't know exactly what it really is. It's like a glaze with a little like soft moistness in the middle, but I could go to Dunkin' Donuts and hammer 12 of those easily. But for me too, I can never go wrong with a classic glaze. I feel like for a lot of foods, I'm very basic. Like glazed donut, regular cheese pizza, vanilla ice cream. I'm very vanilla, to be honest, when it comes to desserts and foods. Keep it simple, keep it to the basics, but a lemon glaze. Never been really into the lemon desserts, but who knows? Maybe my taste buds will change at some point.
Well, I mean, it's a big French Canadian thing. So my
Mm-hmm.
family heritage, from different places. My dad's from Quebec, my mom's from New Brunswick,
Mm-hmm.
but they both met sort of in the Greater New England area, and then yeah, like tradition, you're either going in one of two directions, right? You're making desserts with like maple,
True.
or you're mixing some kind of fruit in, like, and it's some kind of fruited dessert. So we're all about like the tarts and the crumbles, right? You'll make a crumble with like anything, any preserves you might have. So I've always kind of grown up on those fruity style desserts. In contrast to my wife, who's like, "Hey, where's the chocolate and like
Yeah.
peanut butter? Like that's dessert."
Yes, yes. I'm on Kate, who's Jeremy's wife. I'm on Kate's bandwagon there. Like chocolate, peanut butter. Can't beat it. But anyways, Jeremy. Now let's shift gears. Let's talk a little bit more about like your background. So can you, I guess, further sort of introduce yourself, but like talk a little bit more about your background on where growing up, what was fitness and health sort of lifestyle to where did it shift and how did you get back on and all that stuff?
Yeah, yeah. So, fitness journey probably, I mean, like everyone, really starts when you're a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And so I grew up in a household where we had like these expectations built around eating,
Mm-hmm.
which is basically like, hey, if you're going to take something, then that better be, eaten off your plate by the end of the meal. And that also sort of translated to, eating in restaurants. I remember being in situations where I would go out to a family event, and someone would eat their whole plate or whatever, and they were like applauded, like wow, this person can eat so much, like
Sure.
congratulations. Um, and so that's sort of something that carried with me through my youth. But at that time, I was very active, right? So I did a lot of high school sports and sports even before then. Growing up, I was big into tennis, big into soccer. When I went to college, that's when that stuff sort of slowed down.
Mm-hmm.
That's really when I started to put on weight, and maybe also just getting a little bit older, metabolism changes a little bit. So it took some time, but I eventually talked to my wife about it, and I was like, "Hey, I'm really struggling a little bit here. I'd really like to get back into doing something. So, like, what
Mm-hmm.
can we do?" And she's the one who suggested, like, "Hey, let's check out, see if there's any gyms in the area, and we can just start with that." That's when we started personal training. I think that was
Let's
like
go.
roughly 2017
Yep.
era. We did personal training for a while. Most of our personal training sessions involved talking about pizza places and
Yep.
donuts and other stuff. I remember the owner of the gym would walk by and like hear our conversations and just be like, "How are you guys clients in this
Yes.
gym? Like, what is
Like,
wrong
why
with
is
you?"
Kev talking to you about eating pizza? Like, what's the deal there?
So that was always a blast. But that was really where it started. I
Mm-hmm.
got slowly back into working out and stuff. And then I just started doing more things, right? So, like, my wife and I took ice skating lessons for a while. That was something else to keep active.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, I got to a point where, like, I had achieved some fitness goals, lifting some heavy weights. I set my a milestone for myself, to try to hit 505 on my deadlift, and I succeeded. But then after that, I was like
Let's
looking at
go.
myself, and I was like, "Hey, like that took a lot of effort. Like, what is the next big thing I want to try to tackle?" And sort of, I'm getting this feedback from my doctor, like, "Hey, you really need to start slimming down, right? This is causing you some health concerns
Mm-hmm.
later down the line." And it's like one thing I finally kind of had to come to terms with, which is like, okay, well, I'm strong now. I've proven to myself that I have the discipline to keep showing up and to keep training. But now I just have to take this and sort of apply it to my diet. Um,
Sure.
and so yeah, that was the big transition point. And since then we started working together. That was about 7 months ago, and
Yep.
I'll have you know that since I graduated today, as of recording this today, I finally breached the threshold under 165, which was my original goal when we talked
Let's
about it.
go, dude. Let's go. Good for you. What amazing accomplishments, right? Being able to deadlift over 500 pounds, that's strong, dude. Like, that's a small percentage of people that can do that. And, dude, do the math for me, but that's going to be like over three times your body weight.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, I was, probably weighing around 185, something like that, right?
Okay.
So yeah, roughly speaking, about three times my body weight, and yeah, it's a heavy lift.
Dude,
I'll say that.
to say the least, to say the least, took a lot out of you. But one thing I want to go back on that you mentioned is sort of the upbringing we have, right? On how much that has an impact on us, like today, as we grow older, right? As we're growing up. And the clean plate club, that's what I always call it, like finish your food, finish your food. You become so ingrained to it. It's this habit that you think is normal. And now, maybe at a certain point, you were saying, is this normal? Is this, am I supposed to be finishing my plate? I know for me, another thing you mentioned is when you eat all the food, you almost get complimented for it. Like, oh, look at this big dog. He's finishing his plate. He's eating all his food. So you take pride in that. And then you sort of identify as someone who, hey, these people will like me because I finished my food. So I'm gonna be a person that just stuffs my face. Because I remember doing that, going to like a friend's house, having their parents be like, Kevin needs to eat. He's a big dog. He wants to eat all the food. And then I'd eat all the food. I have like a meatball sub, 4 slices of pizza, and I'd be bursting at the seams in my pants, being overly stuffed. But it just was such a not normal habit, or let me rephrase that, an unhealthy habit that impacted me later on. And for your sake, it turned into, maybe not that it turned into, but going to your doctor, just recognizing, hey, there's some health concerns we just want to be aware of. Like, you're okay right now, but let's get a jump start on this before it does get worse. So now you went to the phase of, hey, we're getting back to being active. We're going to get strong, build some muscle. But now let's shift a little bit more to paying attention to nutrition and everything there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a huge part, I think, of my fitness journey has just been coming to terms with the lessons and maybe unlearning some of the lessons I learned throughout my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's probably true of a lot of people. You're like constantly having to look at the sort of habits and traditions that you were sort of raised with and looked around and that have been normalized around you, and like look at those in the face and sort of decide for yourself, like, is this still right for me? Is it still good for me to be pushing myself beyond the point where I feel good or feel well in order to get this external validation? And when I take that lesson and sort of applied it across my life, that's when I started seeing these uh, windows of improvement that I
Sure.
could make that would become easier over time, but at first were a real struggle because it requires really grinding against that mindset, really
Mm-hmm.
sort of swimming upriver against the grain of everything you have ever done.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of individuals, when they have these behaviors of cleaning their plate, overeating, or just using food as a coping mechanism, a very common one, emotional eater, hey, I'm stressed, I'm sad, I'm lonely, I'm even bored, let me eat. A lot of that comes from, at some point in your life, it was probably there to protect you, there to help you out in some sort of way. And what you were saying is, as you grew older, starting to reflect on that and ask yourself, is this even adding value to my life anymore? Do I need this? Is this actually impacting me from accomplishing other things? So we might have the coping mechanism of, eating food or snacking or whatever it may be behind your nutrition. But a big statement I always like to make, and hopefully people recognize, is, hey, never look at it as necessarily like a bad behavior, because it probably was a good behavior once in your life. It helped you through a traumatic moment. It helped you through the stress of whatever the stressful situation was. But now what we're recognizing and more aware of is, hey, this isn't actually serving us anymore. This isn't adding value to life. This is actually impacting my health, maybe to be honest, cutting years off my life. So let me change this. And yes, it's going to be hard, right? So when you talk about like making that change, feeling that resistance, I think you said swimming up the river. How did you deal with that resistance?
Yeah, I think over time, my mentality has shifted. I think there will always be some amount of grinding against the inertia of my childhood. I think the social structure of tradition and habits all of that stuff is really hard to break. It's
Hmm.
kind of the same reason why habits are so sticky, right? If you build a habit, it becomes oftentimes something that you carry with you for the rest of your life.
Hmm.
But then unbreaking or like unbuilding a habit, right? Breaking a habit, that is also sort of a lot of conscious effort. So, I mean, the short answer, generally speaking, is I just took it day by day, right? Um, when I would observe a behavior that I had recognized as, hey, this is potentially impactful or this is potentially difficult. Like a good example would be in my family, we didn't really throw away food, right? So I have
Hmm.
a really hard time with leftovers because if something's, about to go bad and it's on edge, I will overeat in order to prevent
Hmm.
myself from throwing it out. And it's like, I know better now, right? I've been through this situation. I know that the right decision is just, it's okay. Like, forgive yourself, throw it out. But it's still really difficult for me.
Sure.
So that's the kind of thing where, like, thankfully, I have a very supportive partner. And,
Hmm.
she helps to make these sorts of things easier for me by just dealing with it in the background. And that sort of became part of our conversation is like, hey, I'm really working on this, but I need your support. Over time, I have gotten better, right? Like I have the discipline now to be like, hey, this isn't actually serving you. But at first, it just became like, hey, I need help. I know that I'm going to make this wrong decision. And if you just make it go away, then that'll be the first step towards me getting to the point where I can do this myself.
Yeah. An important point you made there is when it comes to making any sort of change with your behaviors, especially those habits, right? We're trying to almost like rewire the brain a little bit or break that habit. It's going to take consistent conscious effort. There has to be consistent intention there, a consistent plan there to just recognize like, hey, I have to put effort into this. I have to recognize these things and even having a plan behind when these feelings come up, how am I going to handle it? So it's great to have that support, obviously, like knowing Kate's there, your wife's there to just help support you through that. And it doesn't have to be a partner, right? It could be obviously a coach can be helpful, bias as a biased opinion there for sure. But maybe it's like a support group, a friend, some sort of relationship that you're close with. But just having that sort of layer of accountability and assistance and like you said, support can make a huge effort or make a huge difference, excuse me.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I think it's not so different than the role a therapist might play
Sure.
in helping someone out with their mental health, right?
Hmm.
This is about redefining your relationship with yourself and
Hmm.
maybe that relationship with food or with fitness. Um, and I think that's where you're really going to get value is in building those relationships, building that support system, so that you can take those steps, encounter that resistance, and call for help if you need it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's okay to ask for help. I've had many coaches throughout my life, through sports, through business, through fitness, just to help, right? Just to educate me, just to provide assistance, some guidance, and someone to be there when times are tough to help you get out of that and continue on. And another great point you made was talking about taking it one day at a time, one day at a time. You don't have to win next week yet. You need to win today. So, the big thing I always like to talk about is like, what do you need to do today to win the day? Cool. We have to, it's almost like you reverse engineer it. You pick out, I have to work out. I have to, get my steps in, hit my nutrition. Cool. How are we going to do that now? First, start with the workouts. When you working out, what workout you doing? Cool. Let's get detailed with it. But just focus on today. It's always great to sort of have a plan ahead of time, just to create, a path of the direction you need to go in. But then after we get organized, now let's just focus on today. How do we need to win today? How can we set ourselves up to win today? So I love that point you made.
Yeah, there's something else that you said that really resonated with me, which was about like having the plan prepared for the things that go wrong.
Sure.
And specifically, I think the thing that I see go wrong in a lot of fitness journeys, and the thing that I sort of knew I was going to struggle with, was that sense of, hey, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
Right? You go into this, you know that it's going to be somewhat challenging to just be consistent and that you're going to have some discouraging moments. And I think this is especially hard when you're like me and you're kind of like do it at 100%, right?
Sure.
I want to give it 100%. I'm going to expect to see 100% progress day in and day out, right? And then like the feedback you're getting, right, every time you step on the scale, right? Because we did daily
Mm-hmm.
weigh-ins, and I think that's a really good tool just to track progress, but it tracks progress over time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, is that being part of sort of modern society, right? I really want that feedback, and I really want it to be instantaneous. I want that effort to be rewarded with that output of immediate feedback, like, hey, yeah, we're making progress, and you're making progress every day, and I can see it. But that's just not how that works. And so if you know you're going into that situation, you know you're setting yourself up for that feeling, right? It's a lot easier to manage that if you've already had that conversation with yourself, like, hey, I am setting myself up to make these lifestyle changes so that I can keep making progress regardless of what it actually reads on the scale day in and day out. Because I know with 100% certainty that if I just keep doing this, that I will see results on the other side.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Collect the data, right? Let's collect the data. Don't be so emotionally attached to it. But again, we're just collecting the information. One, to just make sure we know what we're doing is working. And if it's not working, cool. No one's fault. Let's just make some adjustments. What are we missing? What adjustments do we have to make? But patience is such an important thing because we think about these big areas in our life, like these big aspects of our lives, the big values of our life, our health, your career, relationships, these areas, when they make progress over time, it takes time. Nothing just happens overnight, especially with weight loss. We didn't get to where we were overnight. It's not going to happen overnight. Think about you and Kate, you and your wife. You guys didn't go out on your first date and then get engaged right away. You built up a relationship over time. Getting a promotion at work. You didn't get promoted after your first month of working, even though most people want to get promoted after the first month of working these days. But that's just a common mindset we have. We just want things instantaneously. But we got to understand these big areas of life where we're trying to make progress, they just take time and they just take consistent effort. And it's not sexy, but you just have to trust the process and win the day over day. Put your head down, get after it for 6 months, pick it up, see where you're at. Cool. Made a little bit of progress. Cool. Put your head back down and let's get back to work. So great point making there where it really is a patience game. Once you sort of get in your rhythm of things, it's just a standpoint of like, all right, just keep going now. Like that's all you really need to do. It's not sexy, but that's the truth.
Yeah, and like I love that idea of like just continuing to grind against that goal. But I also want to like, to put this into perspective, right? Working with you on my nutrition goals and stuff like that, one would think maybe that that was, a struggle day in and day out. And at first it was, right? I felt a little bit like Sisyphus pushing up the boulder up the hill. But in reality, working through your program, at some point it stopped feeling like pushing a boulder up a hill. It started feeling like pushing a boulder just laterally. And
Mm-hmm.
at some point I'd built enough momentum that it's just like, okay, now it's going downhill slowly, right? Now I'm doing less work. It has become easy for me to sustain this. It has become normal for me to sustain this, right? The sort of schedules I've made around my eating, the schedules I've made around my fitness, um, like just taking 5 to 7,000 steps a day. It's just become part of my normal day to day. These are expectations and habits I've built around just living my life, and it doesn't feel like pushing up that boulder anymore. And that's the thing that I think that is really difficult to get when you're at the beginning of the journey.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I start any sort of journey, I'm a big, like I said, I'm a big hype guy, right? I ride the wave, I get really excited about it, right? And I go really hard. And then the problem with taking that in a fitness concept is like if you think about it like a couch to 5K, right? If you go and you run the 5K on your first day, like sure, like that's the kind of thing I would do. But then
Mm-hmm.
the next like week, you're hugging your ankles because you're
Yeah,
dying of shin splints.
sure.
You're completely unable to walk. That's the thing. There's a better way. You can make these sorts of shifts slowly and sustainably, and then all of a sudden they don't feel like they're that hard anymore. It just feels like one small tweak over
Mm-hmm.
something you were already doing anyway. And when I think the big mindset for me came when like I started looking at my life like, hey, I'm just living normally. Like this sort of diet and like the caloric control, like, yeah, it has added some additional stuff to do, but I've incorporated so much into my normal day to day that doesn't feel weird anymore. It just feels
Sure.
like a normal, normal day for me. I think when the process starts getting out of the way like that, that's when you know, oh yeah, I'm going to make this no matter what, because I
Mhm.
have the tools and I have the habits, and now it's just a waiting game. I'm going to get there.
Yeah, 100% nailed it. And you said something as far as like it makes it slow and sustainable. And what I would even say is slow is sustainable. Slow is sustainable. Going, from couch right to running a 5K. Yeah, you're holding your ankles, your hamstrings are busted, your hip flexors are killing. But if you did, hey, couch to 5 minute walk, then 10 minute walk, then 1 minute jog, 2 minute walk, 1 minute jog, and you just progressively progress, it's going to feel a lot better. It's going to be a lot more sustainable, and you will get there without any of those sort of injuries. Same thing here is if you just make one small at a time, that little bit of change is going to start to feel normal. It's going to start to feel like your second nature. And because that one little change, yes, at first you probably want to do a little bit more, but at some point it just gets to a point where that let's call it motivation sort of tinkers away. It sort of wears off. But it's something you can still push through the resistance and do, because it's not like you're doing 35 things at once. You're just doing maybe 1 to 2 things. And then once you get that repetition and time, again, it starts to be ingrained into you. And then that's when you add another 1 to 2 things, and then another 1 to 2 things. And you just continue that process, because when you add another 1 to 2 things, the first 1 to 2 things you added doesn't feel as much as a burden. It's not as much as a weight because you're doing it. You've got the repetition. It's starting to become a habit. Long story short, it just becomes second nature, and you're able to take on a little bit more. You're able to do a little bit more because of that. Now, did you have any like specific or big struggles when you first started, with more specifically on the nutrition side of things, like 7 months ago? Any big struggles, any big challenges that were sort of heavy on you?
Yeah, I would say sort of towards the beginning of the process, I came into it like excited,
Sure.
motivated. In fact, my first plan, right? I knew I was going on a cut because basically I transitioned to this idea that like my next big fitness goal is that I'm going to do a muscle up,
Mm-hmm.
right? Uh, Different kinds of strength are really important to me. And I looked at more of a strength to weight ratio type strength, and I was like, this is something I'd like to pursue because it also helps support this nutrition goal that I want to chase. And in order to do that, I'm going to go on a cut. And my plan was basically to take that on by myself. I had a plan of how I was going to do it, and sort of how I was going to aggressively cut calories.
Sure.
So I'm going into it with this mindset. I'm all excited. And my wife is the one who pointed out, like, hey, like Kevin does this. This is a profession of his, and you know, he could work with you. He could guide you through this. He's done this before. And I was like, that's a really good idea. So that's when I reached out,
Mm-hmm.
and we started working together. But even in the beginning of our journey, right, my sort of let's go 100% sort of mindset brought me to pushing myself really hard at the beginning, right? Because I wanted to be sort of predicting what you're going to ask of me and to see if I could already do it. And that's when, those were the days where I would feel, hey, I have maybe pushed myself too hard in terms of a caloric deficit, or I have transitioned too quickly into the caloric deficit from where I was, such that I'm hangry all the time. And this isn't sustainable. Like, what am I going to do? And the thing about me is, I've developed discipline over the years just because of like
Sure.
sports and habits and other, family stuff. And so I knew I could force myself to do it. But the reality was, like, when you're in that situation where you feel like I can push myself and force myself to do this, torture myself to the point of like I am holding on with just the tenacity of my strength, you can do that for a while, but you can't do it forever. And
Mm-hmm.
that's sort of when I pictured like, okay, I don't have the end game plan. I need a plan for the end game. And this is when sort of my wife jumps in and is like, hey, there's a better way.
Yeah.
Um, and so she's like, hey, you should talk to Kev about this because you're probably just biting off too much more than you can chew. You
Hmm.
can restructure your plan with him to make it better. And over time, that's exactly what we did. Right? We started attacking my day with a little bit more strategy. Started attacking my caloric goals with a little bit more strategy. We slowed down that plan to the point where I actually started to feel normal,
Sure.
even in a caloric deficit.
Sure. I love that word torture, just because, not that I love it. I'm not saying we need to torture ourselves or torture anyone, but I think that's a common thing individuals do. They feel like they have to torture themselves. And, obviously for you, maybe that's something you're used to because you're thinking, I'm going to torture myself in order to reach this goal. Because you're very determined when it comes to a goal, right? Like you're going to give it 110%, no matter what sacrifices are made or how this affects other people. But I'm going to do this 110%. And if that means torturing myself, I will. But one thing I love that you recognize is, hey, this one sucks. Like this is miserable. And two, I don't see this lasting for a long time afterwards I reach that goal. Because a big part here is that we want to be able to make the progress and sustain it and be able to maintain it, ideally forever and ever. Like I always like to say, we want that fat loss freedom and to live happily ever after. But at first, there maybe wasn't that hope of the having that happily ever after, even if you did get your goal. So, hey, let's talk. Maybe we need to make some adjustments so this is a little bit more enjoyable, we'll call it, and we're not being tortured. Was there anything specific that, as far as like the adjustments you noticed, that really made it feel more enjoyable and like, hey, this is just another day at this point?
Yeah, the big difference maker for me was when we started to talk about protein intake.
Sure.
So I'm a pretty active guy. Like you said, I've been building a lot of muscle. I had a lot of strength goals. I came into this with a lot of habits already built to going to the gym regularly, working on building my strength, all of that stuff. Protein really did solve that problem for me of constantly feeling hungry and needing to feel satisfied after eating, right? It extended the amount of time that I would feel satisfied. It helped make my meals more satisfying. And at the end of the day, it just gave me the energy and like the nutrients I needed to rebuild that muscle and to make that progress. It's also lower calorie, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
it's helping to sustain and, uh, incorporate those goals across a wide range of sort of check marks of what it's trying to achieve. But yeah, like upping my protein intake like night and day, it almost just solved the problem. The other big thing we did was we structured my meals around, a sustainable plan. So I would talk to you about like, hey, I felt hungry around this time. So I'm thinking I'm going to introduce a snack here so that, I'll have digested it before my workout. That is then,
Sure.
but at the same time, I'll have less peaks and valleys throughout my day. And so by planning out my meals and just upping the protein intake, I was able to basically hit a normal day where I never really felt hungry, or when I would feel hungry, it was mealtime.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true, right? What sort of is coming to mind to me is that 3 o'clock time, right? We had lunch around noonish, 3 o'clock hits, but dinner's not till 6. And a lot of the times we'll white knuckle it until dinner, and that's when we eat our dinner and then some. We have all the snacks, we go to the cabinets, raid the fridge, and all that. But if we just had something there, right, to help manage our hunger, not saying it's going to stuff you up or have you feel full, but I call it taming the bees. We just need to quiet that noise a little bit, enough to be satiated, fine. Hey, cool. Now I can go get my workout, not be miserable, and then have dinner afterwards. But the other point I like that you made is you just ended up setting you up for success when hunger did hit, because by the time it happened, it was a mealtime or it was time to have some food. So it was a lot more predictable. So I love that. Now, was there any other aha moments you had, as far as whether it's mental or another sort of adjustment thing we made or anything like that? I know protein was like a big one during this, but was there anything else as far as maybe of the mindset even that you feel like made a difference?
So I guess there's a few things, right? One of the things that we used as a tool to help track and to sort of base our progress on, right? Gather the data, was just counting calories, right? So
Mm-hmm.
this is something I'd never really done. And I knew it's important, and I always was like, but do I really want to do this? Right? It seems like it's so high effort. But when I started doing it, it eventually it just becomes second nature. It also becomes a lot easier to predict roughly what your caloric intake is going to be over time after you've done it a million times. But this became a tool in my toolbox because I became, accustomed to the idea of like, hey, this is a game of thermodynamics, right? If I
Yep.
just burn more than I take in as fuel, then I will lose weight. That's just math.
Yep.
And I think that was really empowering, honestly, to a given point, because it was just like, oh, like I'm an engineer. I know how to math, right? This is
I know how to math.
deep philosophical wisdom
Yeah.
coming from me
Yeah.
for
There you
sure.
go.
But it was really encouraging because it was like, this is exactly how I would address this kind of challenge in my day to day. I would gather the data, um, come up with a plan for what I want to attack, gather data based on my trial against that plan, and then make adjustments, reiterate over and
Mm-hmm.
over again until we've achieved the outcome that we're looking for. So I think tools like that, tools like weigh-ins every day, and then the mentality shift around this number does not matter. It's just for the record keeping.
Mm-hmm.
Just keep plugging away and working on building that sort of sustainable, this is what my life is going to look like every day. The other big thing that I think changed things for me was meal prep.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of what we talk about and have talked about today has been around coming up with a plan on how to address the pain points. And I think meal prep, especially for the week, that's where 90% of the progress gets made. Because if I know what I'm going into, lunchtime with every day of the week, that's A, easier to count my calories for,
Mm-hmm.
B, a lot easier when it comes to my like lunch break, right? I don't have to wonder what I'm going to have for lunch or modify the plan. I know this is the thing. This is how many grams of protein I'm going to be grabbing. This is roughly how it's going to make me feel, right? And sort of this is the plan of execution for the rest of the day. So thankfully, once again, my wife comes to the rescue. She does a lot of that for us. And so I am very privileged. I get to reap the benefits
Sure.
of that. But that I think is a huge aspect to my success, has been having that be part of my sustainable meal structure.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of great points there, right? We're using calorie tracking as this tool, right? We got to find the right tool that works in for you to put in your toolbox, because that's what it is. It's nothing sexy, nothing crazy about it. It just gives us more awareness. A big part of our health and our fitness and even our self growth, things we're trying to improve upon, we just need awareness behind it, right? If we don't have the awareness, we don't know there's something going on. But when we can create awareness from nutrition where, hey, we're noticing, yeah, I'm struggling. I'm really hungry all the time. I'm very hangry all the time. Well, Jeremy, looking at this, this information, this data, we notice your protein's really low. So let's bump that up a bit. Let's try to get in protein each meal, even more protein each meal. Let's see how you feel. Now we know that because we have the awareness, we have the data. So now we can bump that up. Next thing you know, you're feeling way better because of it. This is more sustainable because of it. And even going back on the meal planning, I always like to say discipline is really just being good at planning, being proactive with your plan, but also your environment as well. So we're doing things like meal prep. We're doing things like knowing when our workouts are this week. We're doing things. Hey, here's the obstacles coming up this week. I have a social event coming up. Cool. Let's plan for it. Let's set expectations there so we can go in feeling a little bit more confident with coming out with something rather than just winging it. Because when you wing it in anything in life, yeah, it might work out once or twice, but it's not going to work out all that often. It's actually going to work out less than it does actually work out. So I think those are two great points as far as just helping someone out, where understand like, hey, we're trying to create awareness. Calorie tracking can be a great tool, but also the importance of just being proactive versus reactive in a lot of these situations.
I think too, like when you're talking about sort of being proactive, like for me, that especially became important around eating out because,
Hmm.
we all know American restaurants tend to have relatively large portions,
It's the best, dude.
understandably
It's the
so.
best.
Freedom portions,
Sure, yeah.
But going into like, hey, I'm going to go out this week. I'm going to go out these couple days. These are the places I'm going to go to. Taking a look at the menu beforehand, coming up with this is roughly what I expected to be eating that day, and therefore, if I want to have my favorites on this menu, it would be good to have either, some lower calorie days to help accommodate for that, or to be looking at, okay, what am I willing to cut down on, or what am I willing to skip out on to, keep this a little bit more manageable. I think it's a lot easier to go into a restaurant with a plan of like, this is what I'm going to eat, and then just execute upon that plan, than it is having to have the discipline to come up with that plan on the spot when you're sort of tempted with all of the delicious menu items.
Yeah, dude. When you can see, smell, like use our senses, and then all of a sudden now we're trying to make the decision, you're going to be very influenced to make the more comfortable decision, right? It's something I've worked on, over the last like year or two is managing my like social drinking. Where if I'm saying, all right, yeah, I'll just have a drink or two drinks with really lacking a plan, then all right, you end up having a lot more, and then you fell off track, and then it spiraled into more because you feel like you screwed up. So you're like, yeah, I might as well just keep going. Versus, hey, I'm going to manage my drinking by having a glass of water in between each. Making sure I wait, like getting detailed. Make sure I wait, 30 minutes to 45 minutes until I have my next drink, whatever it may be. But again, having that just a bit of detail, taking that extra 5-10 minutes just to create that plan, that detailed plan, can just make such a big difference in you, one, feeling good about it and having more confidence going into that situation, but then staying consistent and continuing on. Now, Jeremy, if someone was stuck or feel like they're not seeing results, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I mean, I come up with this 3-step plan in my mind, right? This is
Sure.
how I want people to attack this problem, and I don't know that it will work for everyone, but this is something to try, right? The first thing I think is really important when you're looking at sort of making any sort of change in your life is to visualize the end goal, right? So that is the idea that you're looking at your life and you're imagining your best self. For me, at the beginning of my fitness nutrition journey, that is, hey, I want to be roughly within this body fat percentage range. I want my doctor to give me a clean bill of approval every time I go in. I want the blood work to come back all normal, all that good stuff, right? I want to have these metrics of affirmation that I have reached my fitness, desired fitness level. And I want to be able to keep doing that. I want it to feel like my normal day to day, that I'm living my life without having to feel like I'm compromising anything.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the visualized end goal. That's the dream. That was step one. Step two is what's the first step, and I think that's generally the hardest part of any dream, is where do I start? Right? I know what I want to be, but how do I even begin to go about getting there? And the reality is you can reach out, right? In this particular case, I reached out to you. I used my network, my web of my sphere of friends, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's true for a lot of people. But even if you find yourself a little bit more isolated, maybe you don't know a lot of people in this group, you have the power of the internet, right? Um, there are people that can help you at your fingertips. You just need to figure out where do I start? Where do I ask for help? This is a great place, right? That's why you're listening to Eat the Donut podcast.
There we go.
But yeah, and then step three. Step three is how you get the work done, right? So if you figured out a place to start and you figured out where you're going, the way you get the work done is by anticipating the problems as they happen and sort of before they happen, right? This is the big discouraging points. This is the stuff that's going to knock you off the path. Most people that I think go through a fitness journey end up going through it multiple times, right? Because they try it, maybe they try a crash diet, maybe they go and they do some keto, maybe they, throw in a couple other, beach body plans,
Sure.
anything, just trying different things. And I think that's great, right? Experimentation is great. But at some point you get kicked off that railroad. And what you need to do when you do that is gather that data. That's important data, because that's the data that you're going to use to figure out how you don't get kicked off the railroad this time. Because I think that's exactly what we did, right? I had the end goal. That's the thing that's motivating me. I had the first step, which was we're going to, go through and one at a time look at our individual metrics, right? Bump up my activity level by setting a step goal. Set my nutrition goals by, setting a protein goal, setting a caloric goal, right? But then how do I anticipate the things that are going to go wrong? That's the stuff that starts with, like, what is going to go wrong? Well, I'm going to try too hard, and then it's going to feel bad, and then I'm going to want to quit. Okay, how do I not do that? Well, when I notice myself, or when somebody else notices that I'm trying too hard, I need to take a step back and ask for help, right? If I do that, if I nip that problem in the butt before it becomes a problem, I'm right back on track. That sort of a thing, right? I think probably the most discouraging thing is looking at the scale 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, and being like, oh, I haven't made any progress. Or, oh, I have made some progress, but not nearly as much progress as
I was going to
my
say,
level of effort.
haven't made any progress.
Right. Well, of course. And that's the thing. It's like, oftentimes you are making progress, but maybe there's a little bit more water weight that day. Like, there's so many other factors.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many other factors, right? You just don't want to look at anything in isolation. Just gather the data, keep moving forward. And I think if you go into that with those 3 steps in mind, seeing what the end goal is, figuring out where to start, and then constantly using that loop of, these are the things I'm going to hit, and this is how I'm going to deal with it when it does. That's how I went from, point A to point B. Now, I don't make any promises, right? My journey is my journey.
Yeah.
I'm an individual. I've been very privileged and lucky in my life to have a great support system and have all sorts of tools and people that have helped me get to where I am going. But I hope maybe that is a little bit of a template that can help make your next attempt more successful.
Well said. Well said. The first thing you're mentioning is, let's figure out the end goal of, again, detail. What do I want my life to look like? How do I almost want to identify as now? Like, what's that identity I want? And what things am I doing? One thing I always like to do every beginning of the year with a lot of the clients, we did this as well, is on January 1st, this past year, 2025, I asked, hey, what do you want January 1st of 2026 to look like? Like, give me the perfect day. Like, what is your perfect day? Who are you around? What are you doing? What activities are you doing? Just give me as much detail from the moment you wake up to what does the nighttime look like. And then, like we were kind of saying earlier, is we reverse engineer it. All right, what's one thing? Hey, I see myself, going on a nice long walk, getting 10,000 steps per day. Okay, cool. You're at 2,000 steps a day. So now we know that's one area we can start to work on. You want to see yourself being more active, having more energy because of that. So let's start to take one small step and make that a reality. In the last point you made, our last 2 points you made, one is we're a lot of individuals, obviously because there's a lot of information out there, right? There's people telling you this food's gonna, have you grow an extra nipple. This food's gonna, shrink your brain, whatever it may be doing, right? This, whatever. And I can understand how people get confused where it's like, oh, do I have to do this? Where I have to do that? This game is really simple. I'm not saying it's easy, but it is simple. Manage your nutrition, move your body, train your body, get good sleep, manage stress. Like, that's what we need to do. So really what we want to try and do is, instead of trying to fit your lifestyle into fitness, we want to fit fitness into your lifestyle. So I still want you doing the things you like to do, whatever that may be. You like to be social? Cool. We can be social. There might be some management that has to go around with that. But if you like to do those things, do it. If you like to, go to concerts, go to concerts. You like to do X, Y, and Z, do those things. But we just want to incorporate things that can also make sure we're taking care of our health as well. And that's another point I always like to make, is focus on what you can add in, not necessarily what you have to take out, because the things will just naturally not be taken out, but become less. Add more protein, right? You're getting 12 grams of protein, 500 grams of carbs. Okay, cool. It's not that carbs are bad, because they're not, but we do just want more protein. Getting more protein in, plus managing our calories, that's probably just going to naturally bring down your carbs. And I'm not trying to demonize carbs, because they are absolutely not bad, but just an easy way to approach where you're not putting so much pressure on yourself, because I think it adds added pressure. Adds, it sort of drains that discipline battery in our brain when we think we have to white knuckle things and take them out and restrict ourselves. But instead, it's going to do it, but we're just going to approach it from a different standpoint of, hey, add in more steps. Don't cut out Netflix. Let's just add in more time to walk. So the last point you made is, as far as I think that can really help, is planning for the worst, right? Planning for the obstacles, planning for the challenges, because those things will always be in your life. There's going to be stress. Work's going to be, I know, going through phases where work was absolutely banana pants for you, and it was a lot of stress, right? There's things we can't control, but we can control how we react. We can control our plan for when this does happen, how we can react afterwards, how we can get back on track. So a lot of beautiful, well said points there. And I think, yes, this worked for you, but I do think that will work for a lot of individuals as well.
Yeah, and I honestly think that the lessons learned there can be applied more broadly across your life as well.
Sure.
I think a great example of that is we recently adopted a fourth cat. Her name is Buffy, and she's really sweet. She's adorable. But at first, she's in a new territory. She's terrified, right? She's around these other creatures that she's never been around other animals before. She doesn't know what it's like. But we know, based on historical data, that cats generally live in social groups, right? So it is possible for us to get to the point where we see this cat integrating with the rest. But how do we get there, right? So we visualize the end goal, right? The end goal is all cats living in harmony, right? Just like the Four Nations in Avatar. The next step was, how do we get there? Where's a place to start? So what we started with was positive association, right? Feeding them at the same time, but on opposite sides of a closed door. They can't see each other. They can hear each other. They know each other are there. They maybe can smell each other a little bit under the door, but that's it, right? There's barely any association there, right? We see how comfortable she is with that. Over time, that door gets slightly opened, right? Now the scent association is there. Eventually, there's a visual association there, right? Day by day, it's going by. Overall, our process probably ended up taking about 3 months. There was some vacation time in there to, slow things down a little bit. But the point was a consistent approach, right? We also knew that there were going to be certain things that were going to be really discouraging, right? If they got into a fight, right? If they were going to be spending time together and we had to break that up, right? So how do we anticipate that and prevent that from happening? Well, monitored play dates, right? She got to meet in each of the individual cats individually. And if we saw something leaning towards, hey, this could end up in violence, separate them out before it becomes that way. You do that consistently. That's part of the process. Letting yourself take steps back when you need to. And the process continued to flow, and eventually we got to our end goal. So it's been about a couple weeks now, and Buffy is fully integrated, enjoying her life. I wouldn't say she's necessarily friends with all the other cats, but she does tolerate them, and she has her favorite spots throughout the house. And it's, that's a benefit that it took a while for us to get to, right? It took, 2 to 3 months out, but that she's going to be able to enjoy for the rest of her life. And that's the same lesson that I want folks to try to look at when they're looking at their own fitness and nutrition goals, because that's exactly what I got out of this program. And I've gotten out of working with you, is thinking about this as, how am I going to enjoy these benefits for the rest of my life?
Yeah, well said. Brick by brick, right? If we lay one brick down as perfectly as we can for that day, and we do that one day at a time, day to day, it's not really going to seem like much, right? You lay one brick down, cool, you're good for the rest of the day. Next day, you do it again, cool, there's 2 bricks there. 3 months later, you might step back and be like, holy shit, we got a little bit of a wall being made here. That's your progress, right? Holy, there's a little bit of progress being made here. So when you just do that slow and steady, taking it, as we said on this podcast, one brick at a time, one day at a time, just trying to win the day. Again, preparing for these obstacles over time, slow and steady, you're going to get there and live your happily ever after. Now, right? It's a little bit of time to get there. It might take 7 months. It might take a year. It might take 5 years. But then you get to a standpoint where you can just live happily ever after. You can just go about your life with having the confidence of knowing, from a health and fitness standpoint, what you need to do, and you're confident that you can do it and you can stay consistent with it. But even those moments that are a little bit more flexible, one, you're not going to feel guilty because of it, because you're so confident of getting back on track and taking care of business. But you can enjoy those moments without the guilt. You can enjoy the flexibility of life. You can enjoy, making pizza, going out for ice cream, getting the lemon-filled glazed donut, whatever it may be, right? And there's so much less, let's call it like negative emotion behind it, because you just took a slow and steady approach and built up so much confidence along the way. And then you have that freedom. Like, that's the word I always like to use, is like, we want that mental and physical freedom, so we do live happily ever after.
I love that you brought up the word guilt in this sort of like last bit here, because I think that's really that's really what's held me back in the past. I think that's probably true for a lot of people, is that sense of like, am I ruining all of my progress because I am, taking a cheat day, or, eating the donut, right? Eat the donut, folks.
Eat the
It's
damn
fine.
donut.
It's okay. It's okay. Eat the donut. And I think I remember at the beginning of like when we started, right? Like I said, I'm all about this. I'm 100% mentality. I'm going to have like every check mark checked every day, all of the time. And whenever I would miss by a little bit, I would be like, oh, I'm really sorry. I messed this up. This is sort of the context for why it happened, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, no, dude, like, that's okay. It is expected that you're going to go through here and that you're going to like lock in and deliver like 80% of the time. But 20% of the time, it's okay to not hit like 100%. It's like, oh, okay. So by the end of it, I'm finally getting to terms with this. My perfectionism, I can sort of shove to the side a little bit and accept the fact that like, hey, not only is this normal, but it's also part of the plan. Because the plan is 80% consistency and 20%, flexibility. And I think that's the best way to think about it. Because as soon as you get to that point, like, you're still enjoying all your favorites, right? That lemon-filled donut, it's there.
Yeah,
it's delicious. I'm
amazing.
Probably going to head to Medford this weekend.
Let's go.
Hit it up. Because that's the way to live your life, right? No need to compromise your happiness.
Yeah.
You can be healthy and happy. In
Yes.
fact, you should strive to be.
Yes, I love it. I love it. Yeah. And it's funny, the days maybe you went a little over or off track that day and apologize. And I would just look at your data again and be like, dude, you've nailed the last 3 weeks. Like, you should have a day off, like, chill on out. Plus, again, it makes it more sustainable. And it's probably going to help your next 3 weeks afterwards, just because you did that. So versus, again, white knuckling through it, and then, like a week or two later, not that say you would do this, but someone might be, I can't handle this anymore. For the whole week, I'm going banana pants. Where it's like, hey, if you just had that one day, you went, 500 calories over your target. One donut never made anyone fat. One day never got someone fat, right? It's just what's happening most of the time over a period of time. But you doing that is just what most likely sets you up for success for the next 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks after that. So well said, my man. Is there anything else I'm missing? Anything else you want to share with anyone?
No, I think that's a wrap for us. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of other topics we could dive into.
For sure.
There's so much out there in the fitness world. But I hope at the end of the day, my goal here was to, share my story, share sort of some of the lessons I learned along the way, in hopes that it can resonate with some people. People can look at this and say, hey, some of these things also apply to my life, and maybe I'll give this another round, try to take some of these lessons into account. At the very least, I think if folks are going through with this mentality, you'll learn a lot more, and that'll make the next attempt even more effective. And if you keep doing that, it's inevitable. You'll get there for sure.
Yeah. That's where you learn. You learn through the experience and going through it and making those mistakes and then making those adjustments. Like that's where you learn and grow. But Jeremy, if anyone had a question for you or wants to follow up with you, do you, and you can say no to this, but do you want to share any way that they can connect with you?
Yeah. So I've recently sort of updated my handles, but you can find me on Instagram at goldengraygg. It's gray with an A. And I think I have the same tag on Twitter or X. I don't know what people are
Whatever
calling
it's
it these
called
days.
now.
I don't, those are probably the best ways to reach out. If I've said something that resonates with you, or if you have a question on some specific details or something that worked for me, or I've wanted to follow up on something that I've said here today, those would be the best ways.
Beautiful. And I'll make sure to tag those in the show notes and everything, just so you guys listening can connect with Jeremy if you want to connect with him. He's a great dude, super nice. He's probably more than willing to chat and everything. But other than that, Jeremy, thank you so much for coming on here. I really appreciate your time.
Absolute pleasure. We'll have to go out for donuts next time you're in town.
Yes, absolutely. We'll go out for all the donuts. We'll go on like a donut tour, trying all the donuts and rating them and everything.
Did you ever show folks the picture of your donut wall? That's gotta be gotta be a donut.
Were you talking from when Shannon and I had our engagement party? We had all the donuts stacked up.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll have to post that. I've definitely posted it probably when the time was that. Wow, we've been almost married for 4 years now, but probably 4 or 5 years ago we had that, but that was legendary for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, if there's something that, like, for me captures the spirit of this podcast, it's the donut wall. So there you go.
Maybe that's the new cover for it and everything.
Absolutely.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in, checking out this episode. As always, I appreciate you. I believe in you. Go eat the damn donut. Jeremy said it too, and we'll talk soon. Cheers.